Hello, my name is Emily Pearson. I was born and raised in Idaho, and I'm currently studying to become an elementary school teacher. Earlier this year, when Governor Little signed House Bill 93, I was deeply invested in seeing that story play out, and I was really disappointed to see how it ended. I channeled a lot of those negative feelings I was feeling into researching and writing, and I have put together a story of school vouchers, particularly in the Western US over the last couple years, that I hope will help people understand what's going on in Idaho right now and what we can expect to see in the future. I also hope that I can inspire some people to continue to show up and fight for our public schools. I also wanted to give a little bit more of a structured disclaimer. I'm a 21-year-old college student with Google, a little free time, and hate in my heart. While I am not an expert on anything covered in this essay, I did aim to make it accurate. To the best of my knowledge, everything I have compiled is true as of August 3rd, 2025. Even as the details and outcomes of these stories change, their history and development will remain relevant. At every step of the way along a state's adoption of vouchers, tax dollars are abused, public schools are undermined, and schools have their education experimented on. The lack of accountability and care of pro-voucher legislatures should be documented. I hope these stories help us learn and empower us to demand better. On Thursday, February 27, 2025, Idaho Governor Brad Little signed House Bill 93 into law. After years of pushback from public educators and communities statewide, Idaho finally has its first private school voucher program, called the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit. States that have passed similar programs have quickly felt the overwhelming negative effects of shoveling public money into unaccountable private systems. School voucher programs grow rapidly, requiring more and more funding each year and eventually gutting public schools. With these videos, I hope to help you understand what school vouchers are and what damage we can expect them to do in Idaho over the next couple of years if they go unchecked. School vouchers is a broad term for money given to families from the state to cover tuition and related expenses for non-public schooling. Non-public schools includes private schools, homeschooling, and other education programs not receiving federal or state funding and not overseen by federal or state entities. School vouchers includes vouchers, education savings accounts, and tax credits. Vouchers must be spent on tuition and other direct costs of attending private schools. Pretty straightforward. Education savings accounts can be spent more broadly, so long as the parents make the case that the expenses are school-related. During a hearing in 2022, an Arizona representative revealed that education savings accounts funds had been used to purchase an inflatable bounce castle, a home freezer, a tonal home exercise gym, a kayak, a San Diego whale watching trip, an in-home tower garden, and a hairdryer for dogs. The Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit is what it sounds like, a tax credit. Tax credits can be claimed on your tax return to reduce the amount you owe in taxes. I think of it like paying your taxes in advance through your productive purchases. The state deems some of your expenses throughout the year, maybe the cost of raising children, attending college, or buying an electric vehicle, worth the money you would pay in taxes, so they give you that money back. Non-refundable tax credits reduce the amount you owe in taxes to as low as zero, but not past zero. If you owe $500 in taxes and have a $750 tax credit, you will owe $0 after claiming the credit, but you don't receive the extra $250. With refundable tax credits, like the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit, you receive any money left over from the tax credit if the amount you owe gets below zero. Regardless of the form, school voucher programs create extra costs for a state's budget and strain the pool of resources for other programs. I sat in on the House Revenue and Taxation Committee's hearing of House Bill 93 on February 5th, 2025. I recall hearing proponents of this bill argue that it would not cost the taxpayer anything extra, and I certainly heard that it would not take from funding for public education. As it stands right now, this may technically be true. Governor Little announced in his January 2025 State of the State address that he was ready to set aside $50 million for school choice. This is the budget for the 2026 Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit, but this budget will not be enough to cover the projected demand. The Idaho State Tax Commission has been tasked with maintaining a wait list of families who apply for the tax credit but do not receive it this year. These records will support efforts to expand the program next year. Proponents of school choice argue that school voucher programs do not cost any money, noting that public schools receive funding based on their enrollment. If a student transfers from a public school to a non-public school, they say, the money just follows the child. More than an oversimplification of how public schools are funded, this model does not account for students receiving school vouchers who were never in public schools to begin with. In Arizona, 52% of students receiving voucher money for the 2022-2023 school year were already in non-public schools. Arizonans' taxes had not previously been funding those students' schooling. The vouchers were an entirely new cost, one that was disastrous for Arizona's budget and for its communities. Arizona's school voucher story should have been a warning for Idaho. Idaho Education Association members who gathered in Boise for January's 2025 Lobby Day heard the story firsthand from former Arizona Representative Joel John. He told us flat out that if he could go back and change his vote on any bill, he would vote no on vouchers. Arizona's voucher program started in 2011, only serving students with disabilities. It grew over a decade, serving more and more students and costing more and more money until it was made universal in 2022. As ProPublica puts it, this expansion meant any parent in the state, no matter how affluent, could get a taxpayer-funded voucher worth up to tens of thousands of dollars to spend on private school tuition, extracurricular programs, or homeschooling supplies. The Associated Press reports that Arizona went into 2023 with a $1.8 billion surplus. After expanding school vouchers and passing tax cuts, they had a $1.4 billion deficit by June 2024. Originally projected to cost $64 million in 2024, school vouchers actually cost them $738 million because the program was not limited in any way. In an attempt to cover these outrageous costs, other budgets, including universities, teacher education programs, water system upgrades, and highway construction, were cut. And contrary to the promise of Idaho legislators, public school districts were forced to consolidate and close as tax dollars were siphoned off to unregulated private and religious schools. Here are some more statistics about Arizona's voucher program from the Learning Policy Institute and Forbes. Keep in mind that when school voucher programs got popular in the 2010s, they were touted as a way to help at-risk and underprivileged students escape broken systems and access superior private schools. We discussed already how 52% of students who accessed Arizona's newly expanded voucher program in 2022 were already enrolled in non-public schools. The Associated Press actually puts this number at 75%, citing data from the Department of Education. The Learning Policy Institute also reports that despite making up 9% of Arizona's student population, English language learners represented less than 1% of 2022 voucher recipients. Forbes reports that only 32% of voucher applicants were families making less than $60,000 in 2018. This was before the program was even made universal, eliminating any household caps for eligibility. Also from Forbes, only 3.5% of voucher applicants came from underperforming school districts. And of course, Forbes gives us a statement that will resonate with the 32,366 Idahoans who called Governor Little's office telling him to veto House Bill 93. No state's voters, given the choice, have ever approved a school voucher program. Arizona Governor Katie Dobbs inherited the expanded voucher program from Doug Ducey and is now pushing for some accountability for the program after 2024's embarrassing budget deficit, but it's unlikely that the program will be rolled back entirely. A statement on the governor's website from January 2024 expresses her interest in increasing student safety, protections for students with disabilities, and transparency around the spending of public dollars when it comes to private school vouchers. She has received pushback from Arizona Republicans on making progress toward these goals. Also worth noting, proponents for the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit blatantly stated their opposition of such accountability and student well-being measures during the Revenue and Taxation Committee hearing of House Bill 93. Utah's voucher experiment began 2 years ago when the Utah Fits All program was passed with a budget of $42.5 million. Ahead of its first year of implementation, the budget was doubled to $82 million. From what I can tell, the budget was increased so the program could serve 10,000 students, providing them each $8,000. This doubling was not enough for Senate Majority Leader Kirk Cullimore, who asked that the budget be doubled again to $162 million for the 2025-2026 school year. While these numbers are unreasonably large and have grown at a dangerous rate, Cullimore considers this rollout a measured approach, since the initial budget was set low and adjusted to meet demand. Reasoning like Cullimore's supports my hunch that Idaho school voucher proponents will push to expand the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit year after year, despite promising us that it will not expand and encroach on other budgets this year. Predictably, Utah's education savings accounts have been irresponsibly spent and minimally overseen this school year. A state school board report showed that 177 students were able to access Utah Fits All funds while still attending public schools. A bill was introduced and passed this legislative session to amend Utah Fits All in response to reported spending of education savings accounts money on ski passes and other recreation and entertainment expenses unrelated to education. The Utah Fits All website now includes season tickets or subscriptions to entertainment venues and ski passes or lift tickets on a list of newly prohibited items for the scholarship funding. This information sits on a page full of necessary revisions passed in the first year of the program's implementation. Interestingly, ride fees or fares for a fee-for-service transportation provider to transport the scholarship student to and from a qualifying provider remain approved expenses. The website also includes a laundry list of items in accordance with the amendment bill's accountability requirements. Certain physical education and music and arts appreciation expenses are capped at 20% of the scholarship amount. Homeschoolers are rewarded $4,000 to $6,000 instead of the full $8,000 given to private school students. Funding is reduced proportionally based on when it was awarded during the school year. Private school is defined, and education savings account users must submit assessments or portfolios to demonstrate student progress each year. It is baffling that these stipulations were not included in the original bill. Worryingly, they're not present in the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit either. Better late than never, though. Personally, I'm encouraged by the Utahns' ability to recognize negligence and enshrine accountability measures into law. The Utah Education Association is suing over this bill, arguing diverting public tax money to private schools and homeschooled students undermines public education, which is a right guaranteed in the Utah Constitution. And Kirk Cullimore's proposed budget increase was not fulfilled. Instead of an extra $80 million, the Salt Lake Tribune reports the program will receive an extra $20 million next year, bringing the total cost to $100 million. As of June 2025, a district judge has found the voucher program unconstitutional, but it will continue until the Supreme Court rules on it. Wyoming, like Idaho, is relatively new to the voucher scene, and its Steamboat Legacy Scholarship Act is at once strikingly similar to and crucially different from the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit. Wyoming first passed an education savings account program last year, which was only implemented starting in January 2025. The savings accounts provide $6,000 for private school tuition per year for families making 150% or less of the federal poverty level. Despite the newness of their current voucher model, the Steamboat Legacy Scholarship Act was proposed to expand the program. As proposed by Representative Ocean Andrew, the Scholarship Act would have removed all certification and assessment requirements for qualifying private schools outlined in the current voucher program. Plus, it aimed to pull its money from the state's dedicated fund for public schools. Before it passed the House, some requirements for certification and assessment were added back in. In the Senate, Wendy Schuler proposed an amendment to give different amounts of voucher money to families based on their income. So families at or below 150% of the poverty level could get $6,000, but families between 200% and 250% could only get $3,600. Her amendment was passed, but promptly undone by a competing amendment which removed the funding tiers for equity's sake. Interestingly, Charles Scott noted the importance of access to education, saying, "We've never had a means test on education." I wonder if he knows that public schools are free. Before passing the Senate, several other important changes were made. Voucher-eligible schools were expanded to include preschools, the funding source was changed so the vouchers do not directly compete with public school funding, and language around assessment was strengthened. Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon went on to sign the Steamboat Legacy Scholarship Act despite several glaring issues. First, there was massive pushback against the bill. Like in Idaho, Wyoming legislators received hundreds, if not thousands, of messages from constituents asking them not to pass it. Like in Idaho, the program is potentially unconstitutional. Wyoming's constitution explicitly states that public school funding must not be allocated for religious private schools, like it is when vouchers are put into place. The program could have been made more clearly legal with the inclusion of funding tiers based on family income, since the Constitution allows for the use of state money for the necessary support of the poor, but the Senate voted to remove that stipulation. And if that wasn't enough, the governor signed the bill just days after the Wyoming Education Association won their case against the state for the unconstitutional underfunding of public schools. The main takeaway for me when looking at Wyoming is that lawmakers have no real plan when they propose voucher schemes other than making them bigger and bigger. They do not care about the value of a child's education, since they try to remove quality checks like certification and assessment. They do not care about serving underprivileged families, as they remove family income limits from their programs. They do not care about balancing their budgets, as they raise the funding for new programs while criminally underfunding existing schools. And they do not care about what their constituents want. The Steamboat Legacy Scholarship Act did not start on July 1st, 2025, since it's currently in legal limbo. Oh, Idaho. Idaho, like the rest of the US, has a long history with school vouchers. The first voucher program passed in Wisconsin in 1990. These schemes have gained popularity throughout the 2010s and the first Trump presidency, and they have become even more pervasive as Western states have passed them in the last several years. The Idaho Education Association, IEA, has always known that these programs are a threat to public schools, so they've always fiercely pushed back. Idaho is one of the last red states to pass a voucher program, and this is thanks to the efforts made by public school teachers and our union. One of the major problems with creating a voucher system in Idaho is inequitable access to public schools across the state. While proponents of vouchers are always sure to emphasize the importance of school choice for all students, they ignore the fact that a considerable number of Idaho students simply do not have access to school choice, and not for monetary reasons. During a 2023 forum, Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy employee May Roberts noted that nearly half of all Idaho counties don't have a single private school. The IEA collected more data on this issue ahead of the 2025 legislative session to create their policy guide. 41% of Idaho counties do not even have a private school. Only 22% of Idaho's private schools are in rural towns, and 30% of Idaho's private schools are in Ada County alone. Since voucher money will be pulled from the state general tax fund, this means rural Idahoans will be footing the bill for private education in far-off urban areas. Speaking of the general fund, it's important to understand how Idaho's public schools are funded. In the 2024-2025 school year, 9.4% of funding came from the federal government. Federal funds usually support programs like IDEA and Title I. 11.8% of funding came from local taxes. These are the bonds and levies that Idaho is really bad at passing year to year. The other 78.8% comes from the state general fund. No matter how the pro-voucher politicians try to spin it, state tax money that goes toward their school choice bill is money diverted from public schools. As the budget for this program balloons year to year, and it will, just like the vouchers do in every state that passes them, more and more money will be stolen from public schools. To cite more concerns from that 2023 forum, Idaho already ranks low in per pupil spending. In 2023, we were 49th in the nation. Now, we've graduated to dead last, and we will be funding 2 educational systems, including a whole new pool of private school students whose tuition used to be paid by their parents. Another consistent issue with private schools is accountability, which I'll discuss in a little more detail later on. And while a portion of regular Idahoans support vouchers, namely those who already send their kids to private schools, the Secretary of State's website confirmed in 2023 that the top spending lobbyists were out of state and pro-voucher. The Idaho Statesman reveals that these lobbyists are the American Federation for Children, a Dallas-based dark money group funded by the DeVos family, Young Americans for Liberty, an Austin-based group that receives funding from other conservative foundations from even more states that aren't Idaho, and the Citizens Alliance of Idaho, a group of 5 main donors, 3 of whom don't even live in Idaho, despite their group's name. Unfortunately, money finally won out over the reasonable concerns of teachers, community members, and education experts, and Idaho passed House Bill 93, the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit, in February 2025. I'd like to look through the text of this bill and reflect a bit on the House Revenue and Taxation Committee hearing I sat in on back in February. Understanding the specifications of this piece of legislation and scrutinizing the intentions of its supporters in our state government will help us anticipate its effects once it's implemented in January next year. House Bill 93 was sponsored by Wendy Horman, Idaho Falls Representative, Lori Dunn Hartog, Meridian Senator, Jason Monks, Meridian Representative, and C. Scott Grow, Eagle Senator. It creates the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit to help parents send their children to private schools even if they can't afford it. Anyone making less than 300% of the federal poverty level is eligible for this tax credit. For a family of 4 in Idaho, 300% of the federal poverty level is $96,450, and the median income in Idaho is $74,636. In 2026, the program will serve approximately 10,000 students, and a wait list will be created to gauge demand so the program can expand next year. If school voucher programs are meant to help students who are desperately struggling to break free from failing systems, we're casting a pretty oversized net. In order to qualify for voucher funds, a school must offer math, English, social studies, and science instruction. The school must also be a non-public school, which includes in-person, virtual, and hybrid private and home schools. These non-public schools must either be accredited or demonstrate learning through portfolios that may be audited by the Tax Commission. With these as the only accountability measures for student learning, it's important to keep in mind that anyone can start a homeschooling program and that private schools can raise tuition at will. Remember, Idaho's voucher program is a refundable tax credit. This means recipients fill out forms to have their private schooling expenses subtracted out from what they pay in taxes. The tax credit is $5,000 per student and $7,500 per student with a disability. And if that amount is greater than what the recipient owes in taxes, they get the difference back in their tax return. As long as I'm understanding taxes correctly, this means you get the money whether you spend it on your child's education or not. The bar is really low, but we should recognize that Idaho seems to have learned from other states' mistakes and has identified qualifying expenses. These include tuition, tutoring, assessments, exams, exam prep, textbooks, and curricula. It is important to note again that private schools can raise tuition at will. I also expect that we will see how broadly curriculum can be interpreted to get as many expenditures covered as possible, especially by homeschool programs. The bill includes one more qualifying expense, which is the transportation cost of taking a child to and from a non-public school. Certainly, transportation is a major barrier for many families who want to send their children to private schools, but rely on buses provided by public schools. While the inclusion of this financial and time cost as a qualifying expense can be viewed as an equalizer, opponents argue that parents who drop their children off at school on the way to work essentially have their daily commute paid for by state tax dollars. To me, this is just one example of how this program plays fast and loose with taxpayer money. Another blatant one is the lack of accountability measures for this program. As previously mentioned, private schools are inherently unaccountable. They do not use a standardized curriculum. They are not required to take nationwide assessments. They may have lax hiring requirements for their teachers, and they're allowed to discriminate against students based on any aspect of their identity. House Bill 93 does not attempt to overcome this issue, even though taxpayer money will soon be funding the schools, and it even takes pride in its lack of accountability. The accountability measures built into the program are the tax forms filled out by applicants and recipients, parent satisfaction surveys overseen by the Legislative Services Office and the Tax Commission, and school accreditation or submission of a portfolio to prove teaching and learning. There is no oversight of curriculum and student achievement by experts in education. The Tax Commission is taking charge of an education program. During the February House Revenue and Taxation Committee hearing, proponents of the bill said flat out that they want parent satisfaction to be the only accountability measure. They also said they don't want to have the same standards and safeguards as public schools, which are heavily regulated to ensure student safety and academic success. The committee passed the bill, of course, ignoring a deluge of public feedback opposing the bill for various reasons. Let me be incredibly clear. The goal is for this program to grow and starve public schools of resources. While the budget for this tax credit is capped at $50 million this year, the bill sponsors have been brazen about the possibility of the budget growing in future years. This is why they wrote the waitlist into their bill. Already, they're having trouble managing the budget they created and got approved. Less than a month after the bill passed, the Tax Commission, which is understandably not equipped to oversee a program focused on education, asked to have their administrative budget more than doubled. The Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy projects that the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit could cost almost $339 million in 2027. I'm also incredibly frustrated that Idaho is choosing to throw money into a program that has been found unconstitutional in other states. Why waste money on the inevitable legal battles when you could just fund public education? I said a little bit about this earlier, but the way House Bill 93 was signed by Governor Brad Little honestly felt like a betrayal. The bill made it out of committee by one vote and was overwhelmingly opposed by public testimony. When I say overwhelmingly, I mean the House Revenue and Taxation Committee received more than 1,000 emails on House Bill 93, and 94% of messages opposed it. While the bill was sitting on Governor Little's desk, his office was very tight-lipped, which should have been an indication of bad things to come. But they did share that he was receiving thousands of messages on the issue. Unfortunately, Brad Little said, and I hate that I'm quoting this, "I don't believe that Idaho or this country is a true democracy where you just make decisions based on the number of people that show up, but you absolutely have to take that into account." When the numbers were finally released, we learned that Governor Little received 37,457 calls about House Bill 93, and 32,366 of them, that's 86%, asked him to veto it. Against the overwhelming will of the people who elected him to represent them, Governor Little signed House Bill 93. His signature came after his 2025 State of the State address, where he designated $50 million for a school voucher program after years of warnings from public school teachers through the Idaho Education Association that such a program would do damage to public education. In the State of the State, Little explained that he would only support a voucher program that was fair, responsible, transparent, and accountable. Just days before signing House Bill 93, Little correctly expressed concerns about its lack of accountability. Still, he sold out Idaho public schools, overrode the will of the people, and spat in the faces of public school teachers. Whew. According to polling of 500 Idaho voters done by the Idaho Education Association in 2024, 93.7% of Idahoans support background checks for school staff, 91.2% support compliance with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, 85% support disclosing operating budgets, and 84.5% oppose discrimination against students based on sex, race, and religion. These common sense standards and accountability measures apply to all public schools, but none of them are guaranteed in private schools. Still, with the passage of House Bill 93 in February 2025, starting in January 2026, private schools will be a state-funded option for Idaho families. I think it's important to learn more about private schools in Idaho and private schools in general as we prepare to resist the expansion of the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit. One of the most outspoken proponents of House Bill 93, with a representative who testified at the House Revenue and Taxation Committee hearing, was Coal Valley Christian, a private school located in the Treasure Valley. Where public schools are free for students and families, Coal Valley Christian charges an application fee, an enrollment fee, and a student fee each year, plus tuition. For the 2025-2026 school year, tuition starts at $7,550 for kindergarten and goes all the way up to $10,666 for 9th through 12th grade. This means tuition would still be out of reach for low-income families receiving a $5,000 tax credit, but families already sending their kids to Coal Valley would get a nice break. Where public schools are legally required to satisfactorily serve all students, a Coal Valley application must include a statement of faith and a minimum GPA of 2.0. Upsettingly, Coal Valley requires students with diagnosed disabilities to contact the admissions office before even starting an application. Its website states that it does not discriminate based on race, color, or national and ethnic origin. I think it should be noted that this does not expressly rule out discrimination based on gender, religion, sexual orientation, or disability. I would also reiterate that public schools simply must serve all students. Another prominent argument from pro-voucher legislators is that private schools outperform public schools academically. Honestly, it's difficult to find solid evidence either way on this issue because private schools and public schools are not held to the same testing and reporting standards. Much of the research is conflicting, and sources that report positive academic effects after school voucher programs were implemented generally have an agenda to push. Idaho's voucher system intentionally excludes real measures of academic success for the private schools it will fund, relying on portfolios in the case of tax commission audits and parent satisfaction surveys alone. We honestly will have no way to know whether recipients of this tax credit academically outperform their public school counterparts. We know quite well, however, that appropriate, sustained funding for public schools yields positive academic results. Draining money from Idaho's public schools to fund the tax credit will only hurt their comparative performance. We also know that private schools get to pick and choose their students, so their perceived academic success may very well be due to discrimination against students with disabilities and lower GPAs. While the decisive school voucher bill has finally passed in Idaho, the fight is nowhere near over. Idaho legislators will push for the $50 million limit to expand as quickly and as drastically as possible. We are following in the footsteps of other legislatures that have blown up their own state budgets, and we may see that financial impact as early as next year. We will also keep pushing back. Boise School District has passed a resolution calling for a freeze or outright repeal of the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit, and they will likely have the support of the Idaho School Boards Association as they move forward. The Idaho Education Association, the union for public school teachers of which I am a proud member, will also continue its work. We will continue to gather at the Capitol every January to meet with legislators about our concerns for public education. We will educate our members and their communities on the importance of primary elections and advocate for pro-public education candidates because we need to change up our state legislature in 2026. We will continue to show up every day for our students and their families and be the reminder of why public schools matter. American public schools are essential. They are built to give every child, no matter their background or their needs, a high-quality education for free. Easily the most radically humanitarian principle in this country. Education creates dignity and opportunity for our kids. Public education is the foundation of our democracy, and when it is attacked, we must all show up to fight for it.